All right, how's everybody doing out there? This will be the fifth installment of the Joe Show. Uh, this is Joe. It's usually Joe and Al, and this is a little subcategory of our overall show called Kind of Right. And I've kind of I've done a few of these things because Al was out of town and or not available. He and his dad and I were supposed to do a show last night, which I had to cancel. So I wanted to discuss something that is very well, I know quite well, and maybe some of you don't. It's kind of inspired by the recent death of Anthony Bourdain, who is a very troubled guy, and but a very talented guy. And you'll notice throughout history that you'll find some of the greatest artists and inventors and people that do incredible things are usually people that have severe mental distress. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about mental illness. And, in doing so, I'm going to talk about myself a little bit, and then maybe, which is not, I need to preface, and it probably doesn't have to, it's probably not necessary to preface this, but mental, I don't really enjoy talking about myself. It's not something that that I really don't want to, it's not something not an egomaniac, and certainly not going to, spend a lot of time talking about me. But I think my story, or at least over the years, my story has helped a lot of people. And I'm not afraid to talk about things like this because I think that it's just part of who you are, and and if it could help somebody, then it's definitely worth talking about. So let's talk about a little bit of mental illness, and we'll start like this. Now my situation is my first memories when I was from my first memories, I felt there was something wrong. There was something I felt anxious, and I felt like there was some sort of a weight on my shoulders. And, I'm talking, we're going back to when I was 5 years old. And so there is a definite, argument to be made over whether mental illness is caused by environmental factors or genetic. And I believe it's probably a combination of both. I mean, if you live in a household where you're beaten every day, and you endure that for 10 years, you're probably not going to be okay. However, if you're genetically predisposed to some sort of illness, then, it doesn't really nobody really has to be mean to you. So my deal is I had basically depression and anxiety from the time that I can remember. And this is this is widely discussed on the internet, and what to do about it and what it feels like, and whether medication is the way to go or you should go to psychotherapy. And I'll share my experience and then kind of share the experiences of people that I've met along the way, and actually help, because I don't have any, for whatever reason, I don't feel it's not an embarrassment for me. It's part of my Well, it's part of who I am. So, going back, let's go back to when I was high school, college years, having depression. And I'm not talking about, everybody has depression and anxiety. There isn't a human alive that hasn't experienced some sort of depression and anxiety. If your loved one passes away, or if your mom or dad passes away. There is you're allowed to get depressed. This is part of being human. It's okay. And same goes for anxiety. If you have a really big interview coming up, or if you have a huge test coming up, or you're under some sort of assault, or anxiety, or feeling uneasy, a sense of uneasiness is certainly verified. It's certainly part of the deal. It's part of, that we have a fight or flight mechanism. So, it's a normal thing. It's a normal thing to feel anxious when there are things coming up that will make you feel anxious. Same goes for depression. What's not normal is to constantly feel depressed and feel anxious. That's not normal. So if you have chronic, and I'm talking about when you feel like there is a 200-pound weight on your shoulders all the time, and you're constantly worried, then that's not normal. It's not a normal thing. Now, at my advanced age of soon to be 55, back when I was in high school and college, and this is going to go to when, this kind of thing was not really, there were very mental illness back when I was in high school in the 70s and college in the early 80s. Was something that I never thought about. Nobody thought about it. It just wasn't I took a Psych 101 class, but it was never really something that you talked about, and that that I never thought that I knew anybody that was mentally ill, including myself. But there was sort of a period of enlightenment in which, whether it be for pharmacological reasons or enough people doing crazy shit, that people started to realize that, hey, there's folks out there that are sick, and they're not sick as in heart attack or need a lung transplant, or they have a medical issue in the sense that, there's something that you can look at, broken bone, but they're in mental distress. So my I wasn't cognizant really of my situation, and basically what I did was sort of just hide it and put my best face forward and trudge through, but it's almost like I explain it to people like this. It's like using 50 to 75% of your energy just to put across a face that is normal. Now, I can't describe to you, I guess I can't describe to you if I didn't use that energy to be normal, what would a person with mental illness look like? But I would imagine, like, there are people that jump out of bed excited to go and face the day. jumping out of bed for me took everything that I had on most days. And that was I did what I had to do and was able to establish friendships. I was able to get married, and my first marriage, which I screwed up. But the first time that I ever said, hey, there is something wrong and I need to go and fix this, was when my first wife was pregnant with my daughter, my only child. And I said, to myself, I said, I can't raise a child the way that I am. So at the ripe age of 25, because my daughter was born 4 days after my birthday, so she was born when I was 26. But I want to say proceeding, before a few months after I knew my first wife was pregnant, I went to a counseling center, and I met with a couple of counselors, and then I met with a psychiatrist, and he prescribed me some medication. And that medication was something that I've been on since then. And it was very early in when drugs came along. And I believe the first drug that came for depression was Prozac. And I want to say that is a drug that had not been around for very long, up until the late 80s, early 90s. And it was really the first SSRI drug, which is, I'm going to screw this up, but it's a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And people that are depressed, it was basically for people with depression. Now, the drug that I took, which was clonazepam, which I still take to this day, and I honestly, I take the same dose that I took 30 years ago. That drug, it masks anxiety. It's very much in the same family as somebody that's taking, say, Ativan today, or Xanax today. It's a very close relative. It's in the benzodiazepine family, and and there are some people that just get overwhelmed and anxious, and they need to take it. And there are some people that have just chronic anxiety, which I did. I had chronic anxiety and depression. And you have to understand, chronic anxiety and depression, it's kind of this vicious circle, because when you're depressed, you lose, you lose hopeless. You become hopeless. And when you become hopeless, you become afraid. And when you become afraid, you become angry, because, your fear and anger are first cousins to one another. I mean, because, you need to survive as a human being. So, I mean, in order to get food and clothe yourself and, be able to exist in this society, you have to get out of bed and go to work and do something with yourself. And that's really hard to do when everything in your body is telling you to just, stay in bed. And I'm not a person, never was a person of means, and, couldn't just use my trust account and just forget about it. I had responsibility. So moving forward, I was, this worked. I was able to function. I was able to function through life. And I was able to, sustain a marriage for the better part of 12, 13 years, my first marriage. And through that time, I had gone and seen a number of psychologists, and there was really never, I'm sort of a logical type person, meaning I would go in and I would say, listen, tell me what the program is. I mean, here's what I have. Here's what I feel like. Here's what do you do with somebody like me? How do you fix it? How do you correct it? And a lot of times I would go to several of these visits and just kind of walk away, just not like feeling like this isn't going to go anywhere. And it's not really because I didn't think that it would work. Or that I was impatient. It was more like I had the feeling that this person that I was working with really didn't understand what the issue was. She didn't. So, I mean, if you don't understand what the issue is, how are you going to fix it in a person? And I'm sure I'm not a psychologist, but I'll tell you one thing. The psychiatrist I went to, the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist is a psychiatrist can prescribe medication. And in my early days, when I first started taking clonazepam, I used to go and visit the psychiatrist so that I could get a prescription refill. And we would sit there and talk, and he would I'd sit there and answer questions about, because I build houses for a living, I'd help him with, ideas on what he should do with the house that he was building as a vacation home down in Provincetown at the time. So, I mean, my only goal was to go and get the prescription and get out. But since then, I've tried various forms of meditation. Meditation works quite well. Problem is, I'm not a very regimented person or disciplined person, so it's a daily routine is not my thing. I sort of just wake up and I do things on the fly. But the most amazing thing that happened in my life was I was approximately 42 years old, and I had noticed that there were much more drugs on the market. Now, I had tried Prozac, and Prozac had no effect whatsoever on me. And I went in to see my general practitioner, and this, by the time I was 42, we're talking about 13 years ago. We're in the new millennium, and there were quite a few SSRIs out then, and there are quite a few more now. And I told him, I said, look, and he had known this. I'm pretty open. I don't really have anything to hide. I'm not embarrassed by it. But I said to the doc, I said, I got to do something. I got to do something, because one of the things that happens with if you have chronic depression is that I would have mood swings that were just unfair to my new girlfriend who I was with. I made sure I was with my new girlfriend who became my wife for 7 years, because I said to her, look, when I first got divorced, my inclination was to never marry again. And there's a lot of people that get divorced and do that. But I decided that, we were together. I had built a house. She was living with me. And I wanted to make sure that she saw every side of me that there was, because, and at the same time, I had to get more used to the idea that there might be a person out there that could actually tolerate me. So we went almost 7 years before I kind of opened my mouth and said maybe we should get married. And then the that was all over. As soon as she heard that, we were going to get married. So the thing is, I took this. I went to the doctor, and I asked him. I said, "Look, I know there's a lot of new SSRIs out there, and unlike a heart attack or a broken bone, it's hard to believe that you can feel better mentally just by taking a pill, and pills are widely overprescribed, in my opinion. I mean, I think that there are people that they're depressed because they don't like their job. They're depressed because they don't like their marriage. And I'm not saying that is that they shouldn't be given SSRIs to help them out. I'm not saying that, and I don't know whether that is whether they're even candidates for SSRIs. But I know that it's given out to a lot of people who just say, I'm depressed. The overprescription of medication. But I'm pretty clear that my situation was from the time that I can remember. And it took 4 drugs to find the right one. And I ended up, one drug, I can't remember what the drugs were, but one drug where I was, I had 3 dreams in a row, 3 nights in a row of killing my family. So I figured that was probably the wrong drug. But I discovered, and this was for myself, I took Lexapro. And Lexapro is now it's a generic drug. It's very inexpensive to take. And when I say immediately, after 2 weeks, I was almost a different person. Mood swings had gone away. I used to have a thing. There is a thing that's been out there for a long time. It's called seasonal affective disorder, where basically the light, when when the end of the summer comes, especially up in New England here, the light starts, the days get shorter, and the lack of light kind of puts you into a hole. Well, the year that I started taking this, that went away. And the mood swings went away. And it was I call it an amazing, just a life-changing drug. Now, I wish I had found it at 14, but it didn't exist. And that's the way this shit goes. But I found it, and it's been life-changing. Now, the problem, is that you're 42 years old, and you have 42 years of history being not right. And one of the things that, for example, I went to UMass Amherst. I was there for 4 years. I didn't graduate. I went back a few years later, asked what I needed to do to graduate. One of the deals was I had to go to and take a math class out at UMass Amherst. I couldn't take it where I live. And UMass Amherst was 140 miles away. So at any rate, I ended up, there was this lady at UMass who said, well, this is long before, the internet was big and, you could take classes anywhere. But there was a college out it was part of SUNY, the State University of New York. And I transferred all my credits there and took a math class and 2 core requirements, and I got a degree from the college that I've never been to. But that's more commonplace today, but when I did it, it wasn't. And what I'm getting at is that my thing was that I could when I got out, even when I finished college, had an actual degree under my belt, there was no way that I could ever hold down a full-time job. There's no way it's going to happen, because I had days where I literally couldn't function. And you just don't, and you don't know when that's going to happen. You don't know when you don't have full control of your mind, and you don't know what and it's not situational. It doesn't matter. If I could have had the great day the day before, everything can be going wonderful, and I could wake up and be in a hole like you wouldn't believe. So the thing is, I knew that I could never go and work 9 to 5, 5 days a week. I mean, I don't think there's companies that, this guy's out 2 days a week. It's going to work. It's just, it's not going to happen. So, I mean, my thing was, I said, what can I do? What can I do where I can kind of control my schedule? So I had to work for myself. That was unequivocal. And I had to, and I became a house builder, so that I have a lot of people working, subcontractors working, and it melds well with my condition. And the problem is when I found the solution, and it's not the end all be all, but the solution to the mood swing is that you don't forget, having been this problem, that the cloud lifts, and you no longer have to spend a tremendous amount of energy trying to be normal and seem normal to people around you. But you never forget the history that you've had. So it sort of lives on, even though you don't feel that way anymore. I don't have a problem with the fall. I look forward to the fall, quite frankly. I'd rather be in cooler weather. But it doesn't, plus you at 42 years old, when I started taking this, I mean, you kind of, I was still very involved. I was raising my daughter, and there's no huge changes in your life. You're not going to light the world on fire at 42. And not to be negative, but, if you look at the stats, most people don't light the world on fire at 42. But, so that's kind of my story. And what I want to point out is that there are a lot of people I've helped along the way who had issues, and it's pretty easy to spot them, or at least if you are one, you can spot one pretty quickly. And the deal is you want to be, I would tell them the story, and if they use it, great. You can't force anyone to do something, but it's okay, and it's becoming more okay, especially for men, because men are, constantly told that you pull yourself up by your bootstraps and give yourself a slap and go out there and do some fucking work and, get over it. Well, it doesn't work that way. I mean, it's unless you have it, you don't understand it. And I think that's kind of one of the problems with some of the psychiatry today, is that, it's very hard for somebody who's never understood this to actually, try help somebody that has. You kind of have to know, or at least I think you kind of have to know what the person actually feels in order to fix it. And believe me, Anthony Bourdain And it's not. Look, this isn't. It just happened to fall into a position where where he passed away, and I had some time to talk about it. But he's one of many people that have died by their own hand, and suicide is, it's a terrible thing. It's a terrible loss. What a loss to. I enjoyed his show. What a loss. And there are many unknown people that do this, and what a horrible thing to happen to a family. So, my point is, if you can kind of put yourself out there and say, you know what, as a man, it's okay. It's okay to admit that you've got some issues, and it's okay to try and fix them. And and I try to tell people that you can't be. On the flip side, you can't become just an excuse for not doing anything. You know what I mean? You do have to kind of, no matter how much pain, I was able to get up and do what I had to do. I was never going to be like some, corporate titan or anything like that. And I knew that. I knew that very early on. But, you do have to, you can't let this become a crutch for yourself either. But I implore anybody that has, that can relate to this in any way to go out and seek out help. There's so much help out there. So much help that's that wasn't available 30, 40 years ago, that so many good medications that, and be careful while you're doing it. You don't want to, you don't want to take the wrong medication and be worse off. But you do want to, and you're never going to find a medication that's going to make you, turn into a different person. That's just not going to happen. Yeah, you don't lose your personality. I'm pretty much the same person I was when I was, 18 years old, but I feel a lot better about myself, and I believe that's the importance, and I feel like a weight's been lifted off me, and that's important. But these kind of things, it's something that if you have it, if you recognize or identify with any of this, then, please get help. Get help for yourself. One of the things that I find in this society is there's too much focus on, if you have a heart attack, you're going to have your whole family around you standing by the bed, and after you have your triple bypass or whatever the hell they need to do. But if you're one of these people that are mentally ill to the point where you're thinking about killing yourself, well, is that any less serious than the heart attack that somebody's going to have? And in my opinion, it's not. If you're dead, you're dead. Whether you kill yourself or you die from a heart attack. And to say that you're weak, well, if it was all, if it was all emotional and if it was all environmental, maybe somebody could make a pretty poor case for that, because, there are, I don't know, because you're, you should be able to suck it up because you're not really inherently ill. But it is statistically proven that mental illness is passed down through families. It's just no question about it. I've got several sisters that in the same boat, and we've all kind of had it, gone through the same journey. So I guess that's kind of, well, I'm at 35 minutes here. I guess that's a Joe Show 5. And remember, please listen to Kinda Right. And if you don't like Kinda Right, tell a friend, and maybe they'll like it. if you know somebody that sits in front of a computer all day or is on the road a lot and they need something to listen to other than a book on tape or the radio, pass our little podcast along. And if it's disgusting and you hate it, well, don't. So, good luck to you all out there. If you're fucking crazy like me, get some help. That was the point of this whole thing. And Al and I will be back next Tuesday. We'll talk to you then.